Hello everyone, bonjour. I'm sure it is for you as it is for me, being here with colleagues and peers and friends, talking about settlement and inclusion and immigration. It's an event I look forward to every year, so I want to thank Vicki and the Pathways to Prosperity team for the invitation. And they regularly include New Brunswick into these discussions, and we appreciate that and the opportunity to present on what I think are the interesting actions happening in the province. So the story in New Brunswick is really one of growth and geography. Growth in terms of the increased number of newcomers arriving in the province due to higher levels of immigration, and geography in that the province has a fairly rural population. So, and both of these, of course, impact the goals for settlement and the needs for settlement now and into the future. So I'm going to begin with just a little bit of background about New Brunswick, because I'm sure it's not well known to all, and then include the immigration landscape, and then move on to the settlement part. My timer hasn't started, but that's good, or maybe it has. Okay. And I've been in my current role for about 2 years, and prior to that, most of my career has been outside of the province, so I think I'll be able to share with you a semi-unbiased perspective on what I think is the impressive progress and direction happening in New Brunswick. So the demographic challenges facing this country, I gotta click. The demographic challenges facing this country are not news to anyone in this room. However, in New Brunswick, the economic pressures of an aging population are more acute. And the birth rate can't sustain population growth. And in the Atlantic region, this is all compounded by a historic pattern of out-migration, particularly of young people. And although in the 2016 census, New Brunswick was the only province to have a smaller population than the census before, a lot of progress has been made to reverse that trend, and we're seeing news stories to this effect more and more frequently. I saw one not that long ago that said population growth the first time in decades. I think also on a positive note, when we talk about these demographic pressures, it seems to me to be serving as a motivator for communities to become engaged, meaningfully engaged in issues of attraction and retention of newcomers. And as I go across the province and meet with different groups, I can say I'm genuinely impressed by the level of engagement by communities on immigration-related matters. It seems like it's become critically important to a lot more people, so that's good. From a strategy perspective, we're seeing more and more communities in the province developing population growth or immigration plans. And from a coordinated communities perspective, there are a host of examples I could give, but again, at that local level, we're seeing more and more instances of working groups or committees that are being formed, again, with helping local communities to achieve their goals around attracting and retaining newcomers. Service providers are also increasing their coordination, as are funders, which are both positives. The province recently launched its, next 5-year population growth strategy, which is aiming to get to 7,500 permanent residents annually by 2024 with an 85% retention rate. So when we talk about the settlement goals, undoubtedly these targets will impact what we're trying to do from a settlement perspective. The strategy was titled New Beginnings. It's also important to note, even with an ambitious goal for immigration, newcomers and immigration will not fill all of the population and labor market growth needs of the province. And that's where work is being done to hopefully keep people in the province and ensure they have an opportunity to attach to the labor market in a meaningful way. And efforts are always ongoing to attract, either repatriate former residents of the region or others elsewhere in Canada looking to start a life in New Brunswick. That's a bit of the economic side. From the humanitarian side, there's been growth there as well, and also I would say a genuine desire for more. The proportionally high number of Syrian families that arrived in the province starting in 2016, along with a very high retention rate for all refugees in the province, I think demonstrate a resettlement capacity in the province. So we would like to see more of that going forward. How do I go back here? This is out of order. Okay, so we'll go there. My one of 2 stat slides. So how much growth has there been? Well, there's been a lot. Now, of course, when you look at those numbers from another jurisdiction, those might seem inconsequential, but they're very meaningful to a province like New Brunswick that's seen population decline, doubling in just 5 years. So you can imagine in Manitoba, during that same period of time, that province went from 13,000 to 15,000 permanent residents. Imagine instead if that was 26 and what those additional 11,000 people would mean to different communities. It would be very impactful. So as a result of all this growth that we're seeing, there are of course more and more communities than ever that are benefiting from the contributions of newcomers. And I want to give you one small example of a small place, a population of around 17,000 people. They've developed a population growth strategy, and in it, they've talked about that over the past 20 years, their population has declined by 17%. And the people that are remaining, there are fewer younger people and more older people. Older people contribute to the community through their lives and still in order, but that's another conversation. Back to the immigration side, though, in 2015, the immigrant serving agency there saw 40 newcomers, which was a high rate for them back then. It grew over the next couple of years, and now last year they served 140 people. And you don't really have to be from a small community to imagine the impact of that level of growth. And across the province, as we see more and more families coming to the province, there are a multitude of benefits, but one I think is of interesting, it's around schooling, where some classes that may have been closed are remaining open, or new classes that are opening because of this influx of people. My 6-year-old daughter's school in Fredericton Elementary School has had more students than they've had in 10 years. So ultimately, all of these additional people, of course, mean and companies in the province have the workforce they need to grow, but more importantly, communities are becoming more diverse, which is beneficial, as we all know. There we go. I mentioned at the start the growth part. Here's the geography side, and we're moving more into the settlement piece. So investment at the provincial level in service providers has grown over the past number of years, and there are roughly 20 that we support. Just shown here in red are the immigrant serving agencies, and in blue we have satellite offices that we began piloting 2 years ago, which have been seemingly to work quite well since they've been launched. Now, of course, it's important to say with all of this, the real rubber hits the road with the people working in the settlement sector diligently and dedicated with their clients and their communities. That's the key to all of this. So going forward, we have a vision of getting more people to access settlement services. And we know from IRCC's research that roughly nationally 40% of immigrants access settlement services. Going forward, if we're going to achieve this new ambitious 5-year immigration goal, it's going to require, as Chris talked about, more than those that are already working in the sector and the agencies. And going forward, we're going to need to continue our support of rural communities, and of course, very important to the province, is supporting the needs of francophone communities. So when you look at that picture, when I say how rural is the province, 47% of the population live in communities of 5,000 people or less. So it's very rural. So the approach to tackling some of this geographic challenge has to include new approaches and technology, again, to increase access. An example of this past year from my settlement unit, we began piloting and testing online language training, originally for the spouses of the Atlantic immigration pilot projects. The thinking is make the families settle more and help increase retention. We then expanded it to include spouses post-arrival and also other participants, international students, as Chris talked about, and even temporary foreign workers, participants of our Francophone Strategic Initiative program as well. So we'll see where it's going. I've looked at the statistics just recently, and they look promising in terms of usage. Again, it's not really something, we're trying to test it to see is it something that others, employers, other partners can leverage and move forward with, not necessarily something the Population Growth Division will do long term. And the data we get from technology will in some ways help us to make more informed decisions on perhaps which of these new approaches are working and where potential other needs are. There we go. Yeah, we're going right. See, I got it now. There we go. So the goal for settlement going forward, it has to be more than just funding from IRCC or the Population Growth Division, and not just funding, but the Atlantic Canada Opportunity Agency is engaged now in ways that it hasn't been in the past, but it has to, at a provincial level, involve other government of New Brunswick departments, of course, municipalities, local government, the broader community, and employers as well. So, because if we're going to achieve this higher settlement retention number, we're going to have to do a few things differently. There are a growing number of federal and provincial departments that are engaged with settlement issues, and that's a positive, and these relationships are highly collaborative. Going forward, as we roll out, we'll need to kind of define those roles and formalize some of how these collaborations will be happening. But I mentioned piloting new services, satellite offices, online language. The settlement unit that I work with, we try to engage with people before they arrive. We push out information on a variety of different topics, from explaining the K-12 system, webinars with our immigrant serving agencies so people can make that connection and learn about the benefits that those organizations that they provide. This past year, we piloted basically a Business 101 program for people that are destined to the province through the Entrepreneur program, again, to hopefully speed up and increase their success after they arrive. We're digitizing some of our resources. We're taking our provincial orientation guide that was a PDF and testing it in a course format so that we can get insights into seeing what information are people accessing, either to enhance that resource or perhaps develop others. The Atlantic Immigration Pilot Project really is a bundle of a lot of the things I've talked about, from the pre-arrival side of things, providing information. It aims to get people to access more settlement services. It tasks employers with actions, so again, broadening the responsibilities beyond just immigrant serving agencies. And the key piece to the AIPP are the needs assessment and settlement plans. And these are useful for the purpose of the pilot, but my point on the data and information, these plans have served as other values for us. Sourcing nurses in the province, and probably all provinces, is a high priority. We comb through the needs assessments and settlement plans to look for spouses with either nursing and or healthcare backgrounds, and we found dozens, talent right in place, and we reached out to them and connected them to a contact at the Department of Health in New Brunswick to say, if you're looking at licensure, we can help you go that route. So my counterparts in the Atlantic, if you aren't doing that already, that'll pay for your trip here to source some nurses as they're desperately needed. Or even the rural pilot. I don't know if there's an assessment and plan for that, or the municipal pilot also. This settlement is ultimately taking a variety of different forms, and a very quick example is a small community also experienced population decline. They have multiple federal and provincial departments engaged at the table, a large employer that is looking to grow production in a locality nearby. They're bringing people in from Eastern Europe. The village developed a revitalization plan, and as part of that, housing, as we all know, is an issue. They sold some land to the employer, who developed basically a subdivision, put in prefabricated homes as a place for their incoming employees and families, as a short to medium term place for them to live while they're sourcing longer term housing. Other employers in other rural areas are doing similar, buying a hotel, converting it similarly. 4 minutes, okay. Everything that I've talked about from settlement also applies to francophone immigration. It's involved in all discussions, be it immigration or settlement. It holds an immense focus for New Brunswick, and as you see there, our target for our 2024 goal is 33% of all nominations. And if we're going to do this, again, we will require more coordination of service providers, communities, and government. And when it comes to the future vision of settlement services for the francophone communities, is really an extension of what we're doing now, where we take the lead from our francophone communities. And we do this either through ongoing consultations with our partners or our call for proposals, but even our population growth division includes recommendations from francophone communities that we provided a funding for a white paper. Most of those were included in our new population growth strategy. And investment in the settlement service, like other settlement services at a provincial level, has grown over the past while. Fraser mentioned about the public support. I mean, obviously we would have a vision where we see more people supportive of, on the supportive side of immigration. That's our hope and what we're working towards. And I think also, as Fraser mentioned, I think there's a key role where local immigrant serving agencies or service providers play in those events and opportunities to have people engage and exchange and learn about different cultures, and that should continue, but it shouldn't be just all on the shoulders of service providers. Provincial-wide initiatives need to happen, they are happening, and they will continue. Last year, with support of the Atlantic Canada Opportunity Agency and the department I work for, the New Brunswick Multicultural Council toured 15 communities across the province and presented demographic information specific to that location and how immigration can be a part of the solution. Those conversations also included issues around inclusion and expressing some of the newcomer experience. This, again, has to be an ongoing effort if we're going to counteract that discourse that is out there. I guess that was it. Well, I'll finish by saying the settlement services at a high level will be driven by those goals for 2024, increase retention, condense some of that geographic challenge that the province faces. The New Brunswick Multicultural Council had their annual meeting last week, and they framed it, which I thought was quite well. They titled it, Growing Together, Scaling Up While Increasing Your Retention, which I thought was well put. That's what we're trying to do. So all of this will, of course, involve the core work at the individual level at settlement agencies. It will require innovation. It will require technology. It will require coordinated communities and coordinated governments. Not an easy settlement vision, but I think we're well on our way to achieving our 2024 goals. Thank you.